This week's Torah portion, Parshat Vaera, we see the first 7 of the 10 plagues, and the third of those plagues is kinim, lice, which descends on the land of Egypt. Now, in the first 2 plagues, blood and frogs, Pharaoh has his own magicians try to replicate what the plague is that Moshe and Aaron and God have brought onto the land. And for the first 2 plagues, blood and frogs, these magicians, these sorcerers, are able to do so. Here, too, in the third plague of lice, the magicians try to do so as well, but now they're unable to. We're in Exodus chapter 8, verse 14. So there's lice everywhere, on people, on animals. And now the Egyptian sorcerers try to reproduce lice themselves. V'yasu chen achartumim belatehem. And so too, the sorcerers try to do the same thing with their spells or incantations, lahotzi et akinim, to bring out the lice. V'lo יכלו, but they were unable to. Says Rashi, why, as opposed to the first 2 plagues, why here were these sorcerers unable to match powers with the Israelites, with Moshe and Aaron? Says Rashi, quoting the Midrash, She'ein hashed sholet al bria pachota mikaseora, because demons are unable to affect objects which are smaller than barley seeds. So let's break down that statement of the Midrash that Rashi quotes. First of all, the assumption here in this Midrash that Rashi is citing is that indeed there are shedim, there's demons at work here, that's what the Egyptian sorcerers have at their command or their mastery, which parenthetically is interesting because there is a general argument in Jewish thought about the existence of magic and whether the sorcerers described in this Parsha, if they really controlled magic or if they were con men, and they were really what we might call today in America, they were showmen, they were good magicians that you might hire at a party because they're like illusionists, but they don't actually command powers of dark powers and sorcery. The Midrash here seems to indeed take a stand and say they do. These magicians were able to command demons, but what's the problem with lice? That demons cannot affect things that are very small. Apparently, there is a level at which smaller than a barley seed, demons cannot have an effect, and because they were trying to create lice, which are smaller than a barley seed, they were unable to do so. It's a fascinating idea. Let's now look at what the great Rav Yehuda Loew of Prague, the Maharal, in his super commentary on Rashi, the Gur Aryeh, says about this idea. He's going to explain it in a very interesting way. Says the Maharal, Mipnei shehu shi'ur l'tum'ot meit etzem kiseora. The Maharal quotes a Mishnah in the tractate called Ohalot, which means tent, the tents, which is about ritual impurity, tuma. And there in the second chapter, in the third Mishnah of Ohalot, the sages say that ritual impurity, tuma, is transmitted when we're talking about the ritual impurity of death, of a corpse, a human corpse, and specifically bones of a human corpse, that the bones of a human corpse transmit ritual impurity as long as it is larger, as long as the piece of bone that we're talking about is larger than a barley seed. The Maharal says the fact that the laws of ritual impurity and transmission of tuma regarding a dead body uses the same unit of measurement that our Midrash on our verse here in Parshat Vaera both use the unit of measurement of the size of a seorah, of barley seed, that is deeply significant. Why? Hashedim hem kohot hatuma. Because what is a demon, says the Maharal? It is the power of impurity, made manifest, you could say. Ve'en sholtim bebria she'en tuma alav. they cannot affect or touch on any object to which ritual impurity itself could not affect, could not touch. Ve'od, kevan shehu yoter katan micha she'or, and furthermore, since it is smaller, micha she'orah, smaller than a barley seed. Ba'avor she'en bo shi'ur, ein shedim sholtim alav. And then he says simply, it's also just, it's too small. And he's going to say a really interesting thing here. V'adavar yadua v'tam muflahu. This is a really wondrous idea, and it's both known and it's wondrous. Ki davar shehu kiseora yeshbo mamish ba'atzmo. He says, I don't know if this is his idea or if he's getting this from other philosophies. He says that certain things in the world, that you have to have a certain size to be significant. Things that are too small are insignificant, and we no longer view them as their own distinct, unique item, but rather davar shehu yoter katan mikaseora, something which is smaller than a barley seed, hu batel etzel klal ha'olam. We consider that thing negated and sort of subsumed within just the world. So imagine a tiny dot, a speck of dust. According to the Maharal, he says a speck of dust, which is smaller than a barley seed, we don't consider it on its own. It doesn't have its own unique intrinsic value or worth or significance. It's just part of the world. The Ein Hashed Sholet al Klal Olam, and demons don't affect this general world. They can only affect specific things. V'zeu ba'atzmo tam she'en pachod mikasora mikabel tuma, and that's also why the Mishnah Olo says that a person something doesn't transmit tuma, a piece of bone that's smaller than a piece of barley, because because it's so small, it's negated etzel kla'olam, it's negated and subsumed to the general world. Ve'ein tuma b'kla'olam, and this tuma, ritual impurity, isn't relevant, doesn't touch just the general world. It only touches specific things. And now he says one last interesting, it's sort of a play on words. He notes that the word se'orah, barley seed, is really written almost exactly the same as the word shi'ur, which means a measurement. And he says that's not a mistake, that a se'orah, a barley seed, is a sort of intrinsic measurement of things which are bigger than it, are sort of worthwhile. They have intrinsic value and substance, and things that are less than that, lo nikra shi'ur, we don't even call them a worthy measurement. It's fascinating commentary of the Maharal on this interesting notion that the magicians were unable to conjure up lice on their own. Always a pleasure learning with you. More next week.